that there are lounges available for discussions, should those discussions be something that our honorable members would like to have and engage in. If there are any members who are looking to join debate, I see the honorable member for Edmonton Ellerslie is joining debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So in order to frame the contribution that I'd like to make to this debate, I just wanted to go back to specifically what are the rights of that a person who is actually a victim of crime. And the fact is that as a government, we strive to make sure that this person's is protected, their safety is taken into consideration, of course, and most importantly, and the key word is that they be treated with dignity. Let's not forget that that's what the Victim of Crime Fund is intended to do. So then that begs the question, well then what are the protection and rights that a person who is a victim of crime has under actually the current legislation? And then while I'm going through what these protections and rights are, I would ask us all to contemplate then if the proposed changes are actually enhancing these rights and protections, or will they have a negative impact upon them? And I'm reading right from the Alberta government webpage, just in order to help us frame this and consider what's actually happening here. So Alberta victims have protection under the Alberta Victims of Crime Act, and your rights include the following. You should be treated with courtesy, compassion, and respect. Your privacy should be considered and respected to the greatest extent possible. All reasonable measures should be taken to minimize inconvenience to you. And your safety and security should be considered at all stages of the criminal justice process. You should be protected from intimidation and retaliation by all means necessary. You should be given information about the criminal justice system, your role and opportunities to participate in criminal justice processes. You should be given information about the status of the investigation, the scheduling, progress, and final outcome of the proceedings, and the status of the offender in the correctional system. You should be given information about available victim assistance services, including victim impact statements, requesting restitution, means of obtaining financial reparation and other programs. You should promptly receive financial benefits for the injuries that you have suffered. And if charges are laid, you have the right to prepare and give the court a victim impact statement that tells how the crime affected you. And you have the right to ask to read your victim impact statement out loud in court, or ask someone else to read it for you. You have the right to not be contacted by inmates. Your views, concerns, and representation are an important consideration in criminal justice processes. You should be given information about how to complain when you believe that these principles have not been followed. And your needs, concerns, and diversity should be considered in the development and delivery of programs, education, and training. So, under the current Act, before the suggested changes that have been brought forward, there's a range of community-based organizations that actually help in providing the exact rights and protections that I just finished talking about. And the fact is that nonprofit groups, community groups, and including Indigenous communities have access to funds that actually help provide these services and make sure that these people are actually receiving the rights that we as a government, as a society deem absolutely essential under this piece of legislation. For police-based services, a nonprofit organization with victim services units help provide this. municipalities and bands and tribal councils are involved in the process. And then, of course, individual victims of violent crimes, well, they're helped with any physical damage, emotional harm, property damage, and any economic loss as a result of the crime. So what we see is happening is that they're taking money from this Victims of Crime Fund and they're allocating it towards alert, rapid force, drug treatment courts, and hiring more Crown prosecutors, all of which are good things, right? However, the problem here is that they're taking the money from the Victims of Crime Fund in order to provide further funding to these other aspects and these other priorities. And that's what's at question here before all of us today, is that why does it need to be taken out of the Victims of Crime Fund? And I would argue that the rights and protections that I just finished going through would be negatively impacted by the money actually being taken out from them. Money being taken away from nonprofit organizations that are actually providing these services and actually helping the victims of crime. So then so to me, I would like to hear directly from the Minister of Justice, Solicitor General, his response to actually defending what is being proposed in this piece of legislation. As an opposition, it is our duty to actually come into this House and ask these questions. And I don't see why, and I agree with the Minister from Edmonton South. I mean, the talking points that the Minister gets up and talks about buses, it's overplayed. Please. All right? Like, I mean, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to get up in this House and ask questions, legitimate, authentic, and genuine questions. And I hear that. And don't get me wrong, I understand that there's frustration on both sides. I understand that. But reality is that we need to do what Albertans are asking. And when you're telling the Alberta public that you're going to take money out of the Victims of Crime Fund, the inevitable question that they have is then, well, how are the services, how are the rights and protections that we're supposed to be giving for these people who actually experienced, and this is the kicker, because the Minister gets up and he talks about these rural communities and how they're being impacted. That Victims of Crime Fund is actually supposed to be helping the same people that he's talking about in these rural communities that have been through the horrendous things that they've experienced. So you're taking the money out of the Victims of Crime Fund. Well, at one point you're saying that you're there defending the rights and the protections that these very people from these rural communities should be afforded by our government, by our society. And then at the same time saying, no, we're going to take the money out of there and we're going to put it into these other things. So it doesn't match up for me. Especially when the Minister gets up and rehashes the same old talking points from before, from a year ago. So I'm asking, please, answer the questions that we have. Make clarifications so that we can understand. What's the rationale? Under the current piece of legislation, it would be that you'd fill out a witness benefit and or death benefit application. You do not have to wait for a charge or conviction to apply for financial benefits. And one of the questions that I have for the Minister is this going to be impacted with the proposed legislation that we have before us? I don't know. This is something that it's a genuine, honest question that I feel that constituents of mine, and not only of mine, but all Albertans want to know the answer to. Under the current, the benefits, the financial benefits of the program, there's injury benefits. There's actually a one-time $5,000 benefit that would go to a witness of homicide, someone who is the witness to a homicide. Now, God forbid that one of us would have to actually experience this firsthand, you know, and my heart goes out to people who actually, have had to live through that experience, because I can imagine it's severely traumatic. And I ask myself, okay, well, why take the money from that? Like, this is an individual that will honestly need their services, and even under the protection and rights that we're talking about. My understanding, and correct me, and this is the thing, correct me if I'm wrong. I want the minister to correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that this would come to an end. This benefit of $5,000 to an individual who's a witness to homicide is actually going to be coming to an end. And I ask myself, is this dignified? Is this the way that we should be treating Albertans who actually live through this experience? Don't take the money from there. Don't take the money from there. There's a death benefit, a funeral cost for a homicide victim. My question is, will that continue, yes or no? There's supplemental benefits for monthly payments for victims with severe injuries needing assistance for daily activities. If there's anything that would be a tragedy, would be taking away this right and protection from an Albertan that experiences crime. That because of a severe injury, they need assistance for daily activities, and we're going to take that right away from them because we're taking money out of this particular fund in order to put it into another program. There's also the Criminal Injuries Compensation Act, a legacy program that has ceased taking new applications in 1996 for applicants to receive lifetime benefits. All this is my understanding, it will be impacted negatively. And this is what I want the minister to get up and speak to in this House and put on the record. If this is indeed what is being proposed, then what is the rationale? If the minister is suggesting that taking the money from this area and putting it into another fund and another program will actually enhance the protection and rights of Albertans in comparison, then I want to hear what that rationale is. And I don't think it's too much to ask. And one of the things that I wanted to touch upon, this isn't the first piece of legislation or the first proposed legislation that we have in front of this House that is actually doing what I'm going to discuss. And this is what, for me, is incredibly problematic, is that what we're going to see now is the elimination of the injury and witness to homicide benefits, but then also the board that operates to help out in these situations. The Criminal Injuries Review Board, which is an independent review body established under the Victims of Crime Act to conduct a review of decisions made under the Victims of Crime Financial Benefits. It's my understanding that this board will cease to exist. And this isn't the first example of this government eliminating agencies, boards, and commissions, where Albertans have been selected to participate in the governing, in aiding in the governing in this province, And this government is taking the power away and putting it in the hands of the minister. Correct me if I'm wrong, Minister, if I'm interpreting this wrong.
The chair.
And this is something that is happening time and time and time and time again.
Thank you, Honourable Member. 29-2A is available. I see the Honourable Member for Edmonton South has arisen for questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague from Edmonton Ellerslie for his comments. I think that they were very reasoned and thought out, and I think he had a few more comments he wanted to finish, so I'd like to give him that opportunity. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Ellerslie to respond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague from Edmonton South for giving me the opportunity to continue, because this is a warning that I make to Albertans. And I know perhaps there's not a lot of Albertans watching us at this time of night, but just the same, I'm going to speak to it. Because time and time and time and time again, we see that this government is taking the power away from agencies, boards, and commissions, which were created in order to democratize the governing process. It's to say, to gain the insight and perspectives of other Albertans in helping this government make decisions that will actually benefit all the people of Alberta, Mr. Speaker. That is what the intention of these agencies, boards, and commissions are. And what we see this government doing time and time and time again is eliminating, and if not eliminating outright, agencies, boards, and commissions, they're actually taking the power away from them, and they're putting that power in the hands of the ministers that form this government, this cabinet. And they're the ones that are taking all the power and making all the decisions. How is this enhancing our democracy, Mr. Speaker, is the question that I have for this government. And I'm pretty sure that when these same members were in opposition, they spoke specifically to this. Many a time criticizing if we as the previous government would make an action like this. And to me it seems an injustice. It's an injustice that we're taking away, taking the democratic governing process away from other Albertans and putting it in the hands of just one person. And that's what we see again in this proposed bill. Correct me if I'm wrong, Minister, and I'd like to hear your response to this. What is the justification? And Mr. Speaker, I would like to hear from the Minister. What is the justification? What is the rationale for eliminating this particular board that helps in this process? That, Mr. Speaker, is intending to aid in the protection and rights of Albertans who have actually experienced a crime, who are themselves a victim of crime. So I'd like to give the Minister this opportunity to get up and answer the questions that I have posed for him in this debate, and not hear about buses, to hear about how these decisions, these proposed changes to this legislation are actually going to help protect the rights of these victims of crime so that they be treated with the dignity that they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member.